My sense was Jane was the target. The other two kids were inconsequential. He could also control Jane by her younger siblings by threatening them, what he would do to them if she didn't comply.
Welcome to The Dead Life. Here's world-renowned medium, Allison DuBois.
The disappearance of the 3 Beaumont children is one of Australia's most famous haunting unsolved cases. After 60 years, people still want to know what happened to the Beaumont children. Are they still alive? Or did they meet a man who ended their precious lives? On January 26, 1966, 3 young children were seen playing at Glenelg Beach near Adelaide, Australia on Australia Day. Jane, 9, Arna, 7, and Grant, age 5.
So the day they disappeared, their mother gave the children 6 shillings and 6 pence for the bus ride and a snack. So it's actually going to be really important later in the story, so remember that. She talked to Jane about water safety and the rules of supervising her siblings, where to go, and when to return home. Although the children were young, Jane was known to be very responsible and had taken care of her siblings before. They left around 10 a.m. for the beach, and then when noon rolled around, their mother thought they'd missed their bus, so she just said, oh, they'll probably be on the 2 p.m. bus. Then she waited till 2 p.m. So they never came. The father later came home from work, and then that's when they called the police and started investigating where they went. So there's not much to go off of here evidence-wise. So let's talk about
I thought this case of the 3 that we worked in Australia was the most difficult because of how little evidence there actually is in this case. And it was 1966, so they didn't have cameras everywhere. You know, we didn't have technology that's going to catch anything. So that makes it even more difficult, which is strange also because Australia Day is the American equivalent of the 4th of July. So the beach was packed that day, full of witnesses.
Yeah.
So the fact that they vanished is even more puzzling.
Yeah. And so the first thing the cops did, they went to the beach and they started asking people if they've seen these children. So all 3 children went to Wenzel's Bakery between 11:15 a.m. and 11:30 a.m. They paid with a £1 note. So that's completely different than the money the mom gave them. So somebody had to have given them that money. They ordered a meat pie, which was strange for them to order. Keep in mind that the owner did know these children. Mm-hmm. So that's another important part of this. Multiple witnesses reported seeing the children playing near the beach. Several people noticed them interacting with a tall, sandy blonde man in his late 30s with light eyes and a slim face.
The consensus, because I looked it up, was mid-30s.
Yeah. So it is a bit iffy just because when you talk to a witness, they're going to try and remember, but they weren't thinking about it in the moment. So they're like, oh gosh, I think maybe 30s. And then
witnesses can be very flawed. And I think some of them, sometimes we might be afraid that if we don't give a broader age range, that they might miss the person who actually did it and they wanted to help. Yeah. So I think when they said 30s and gave that broad of a range, and that they were just being probably careful.
Well, and also, I mean, you'd immediately think that that man was their father or an uncle or something. So it makes sense that their brain would go to late 30s or mid 30s, right. You know, that range.
Even more so because, as we know, Jane was very practical, kind of a little mother hen. And he helped them change their swimsuit and their clothes at the beach. So I think that's further why people might have assumed it was a father or a family member.
Yeah, they witnessed that he was very friendly, had an athletic build, and was confident, which once again, you're not going to flag somebody that seems very comfortable and confident with small children.
And that they were so comfortable with him.
Yeah, they were comfortable. So that's another thing. But no one did know more about this case than a detective, Bill Hayes. So if you want to go to the YouTube channel we're going to post, I will add some clips just to get maybe some of his 2 cents. But
it was very difficult. Did cops back then like walk the beat on the beach?
Look, they would have probably wandered around the place, but it wouldn't have been a consistent thing. There wouldn't have been a copper in every corner. In the Glenelg Police Station at that time, there was, I think, 3 or 4 detectives working for the whole
Right,
region.
because it was a rather safe time. Right.
You know, in those days, we didn't have the problems we later got with children being abducted. The Beaumonts really were almost the start of the really bad stuff.
I think that's why it stuck with people, because it was the end of the innocence for Adelaide.
We coined the phrase, it stole Australians' innocence.
Yes.
The event stole the innocence of the country. After that, children were not allowed to go anywhere on their own. Mum was with them all the time. The thought of sitting a child down at the beach on a bus was abhorred because of what had happened. Before that time, it was accepted because it was a simple time. Things weren't happening like that.
Can I add a little context too, as far as when they were in the bakery?
Yeah.
A £1 note in 1966 would be the equivalent of around $34 today. So although it was more than most small children would have, it wasn't an obscene amount of money. Not what I would consider, $34. But there was a lot of speculation around that £1 note. Also, the woman that was working in the bakery that day that waited on the kids said that she saw a man fitting this description waiting for them outside of the bakery.
Yeah. And we actually did go to this bakery when we were in Australia. So once again, it won't be on the recorded audio for the podcast, but if you go to the YouTube channel, we will include her description or what her impressions of the scene while we were there.
When you look in the window, you can see the layout where the counter is and where the baked goods might have been back in 1966, even though this is no longer the same store. So, but you can definitely visualize the 3 children wanting to get their little treats to take with them for a picnic or for lunch with a stranger that had no good intent. I'm just really surprised that people weren't clicking away on their cameras, taking pictures on Australia Day that may have caught an image of the children in the background. So there are some questions around their disappearance that we may never get the answers to. But standing here, there was no fear when they were on the beach. This isn't what I would consider part of the crime scene. This was part of the grooming. But at the time the 3 children were on the beach, the Beaumont children were unafraid, and there was no fear yet. I think he was actively working on grooming Jane. I believe Jane was a target, and I think this was happening over a period of time. I don't think it was just him stumbling upon the children that day. Jane would not have been comfortable with just any person helping her change her clothes on the beach, and I find that a very sensitive duty for an adult with a child, especially somebody that would be considered a stranger. So I believe this is somebody that they know. When we looked through the glass window, it still looked a little frozen in time, like it was a time capsule. It was kind of eerie, actually.
It was. And then also they did talk to a couple that was approached by the man. So they would have the best description, I would say. They didn't think anything of it because he approached them with the children.
Is it? And then he had gone up to someone on the beach and asked if they saw somebody get into Jane's bag.
That was the couple.
That's the couple.
That was the couple.
Okay. So that kind of raised the hair on the back of the neck when you hear that, because you would wonder, is he setting up some sort of a scenario for the children to believe that their money had been stolen out of her bag? Because apparently her money disappeared on the beach, and he had walked up and was inquiring about that. But if you're a pedophile or someone who wants to harm children, you might set up that scenario so the kids would then be reliant on you to get home. because they have no bus fare now.
Yes, definitely. And so the police did search the beaches, streets, drains, nearby bushland, because they didn't know if this was a kidnapping or if they just got lost, right? And so hundreds of volunteers joined the search. Divers searched waterways and coastal areas. Despite all of that, there was no physical evidence. So once again, a dead end.
Yeah.
And it's tough. It was in the 60s and DNA wasn't really a thing. It was tough because the one thing we could think of is maybe that £1 note they could get DNA from. But even then, that was a really far stretch for the 60s.
So the reason I was upset about that they didn't collect the £1 note for evidence and bag it back then, they had technology not like ours now, but since 1903, they had been using fingerprint technology in Australia.
Okay.
So I would have thought they can't run it through a computer like we do now. But if they had held on to it, they would at least have it for comparison when they did have a suspect, to be able to rule out people who don't match it.
They could lift the prints.
They could lift the prints. So that probably would have been one of their best pieces of physical evidence. And it just, if they put the effort in to go through and drain the waterways and do all this other stuff, I just would have thought they would have collected every £1 note that the bakery had. And if it was the equivalent of $34 today, they probably had few of them. Maybe it was the only one that day. We don't even know. But they didn't even do that, which I kind of question.
Well, especially since they talked to the owner of the bakery. They were there. You know, they could have, oh, hey, can we confiscate this?
Right.
But that does lead us into our person of interest. The main one on this case is Harry Phipps. And the reason for that is that, so he was a wealthy businessman and he had 2 sons. And in 2007, a few years after he died, his son Hayden actually accused him of murdering the Beaumont children in 1966. So
he said he saw his dad there with the
children.
Beaumont children.
Yes. He was known in his community as generous and a friendly man, and he often gave £1 notes to children. So that's where a flag kind of was raised in a lot of people's minds. He later did raise Hayden's son, Nicholas, at the same mansion where Hayden said his dad killed the Beaumont children. So that's where it gets a little murky.
Hayden had also said that his dad sexually abused him throughout his own childhood. So I wondered if that was true, why he would then turn over his own son to his dad and his mom to be raised if his dad was such a monster.
Yeah.
So and there were a lot of things about Hayden Phipps that really weren't adding up for me. And I know there's the people out there that are sort of, trying to give the benefit of the doubt, like kind of bleeding heart, kind of honestly about things. It's like the son was a drug addict. He was an alcoholic. His own brother described him as mentally ill. And they gave his supposed witness sighting of the Beaumont children such credibility and weight. And the thing I had the biggest problem with is that none of this came out until after Harry Phipps died. So doing what I do, being a medium, maligning the dead. Now, if DNA and there was so much evidence to back up that Harry Phipps did it, I would understand that because it would be a fact. It would be proven. But this is pure speculation. There is no hardcore evidence that Harry Phipps did any of this. And he was a millionaire back then.
Yeah.
So and
he also had a family of his own, children, a wife.
Raised a grandchild.
And he saw him putting these kids in the back of his car. And he heard gunshots, supposedly. That's what he says. But it gets even more interesting because, like you said, Hayden was in a mental hospital. And the reason, I guess, for him not coming forward till 3 years after his dad's death was that the nurse taking care of him ended up becoming his wife later, which, I'm sorry, that doesn't seem ethical, but okay. And she pushed him to come forward with the evidence or with his statement.
And that was according to the family, that he
Yes.
was there in the mental hospital and for treatment, and that she was a psychiatric nurse.
Mhm.
And so it comes from the family and those witnesses that he had met her there and married her. I couldn't find any sources that could corroborate that concretely, but for me, psychiatric nurse, she worked in that facility. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense. How else did he meet her? At the bar? Probably not.
Yeah. Well, and she was never interviewed or took any sort of lie detector test. So
No.
we can't really, it's kind of a dead end with her as well.
And Harry Phipps, if they had confronted him before he died, he could have done that as well, taken a lie detector test. But hello, given us an alibi for the day. Maybe he had a real alibi, but they maligned him and raked him over the coals after he died. That's something I had a problem with, because dragging somebody's name through the mud without any actual evidence other than pure speculation for mediums is usually a no-no.
Yeah. And the thing is, so she had married Hayden from the mid-90s to mid 2000s. She then remarried another man until 2014, and then released the letters between her and him, I believe, to the police in 2016 after Hayden died. And then she died right after.
And Hayden Phipps, just going back to that, it was 2013 that he accused his dad of having the Beaumont children at the house the day they disappeared. I believe earlier than that, around 2007 or something, I think he had mentioned it to some authorities and it didn't really go anywhere. I just know he had mentioned it a little earlier. And there was a book written, and I think that might coincide with 2013 with the accusations, because Hayden passed away in 2016. So 3 years after he made this accusation, after the book Satin Man was released, it's just strange. And another thing that I found odd about the Australian system that is very different than the American system is cause of death. We're always curious about, oh my God, how did they die? We Google those things all the time. People do, when you see it on Instagram or whatever, that someone passed, you're like, how'd they die? There's no cause of death that can be located on Hayden or on Angela, his ex-wife, because the only proof they had of the divorce here, we could pull records, to see that a divorce was filed. Not there. There, it's only mentioned because she had referred to it herself to other people that he was her ex-husband. So that's how we knew.
Yeah. And another thing, okay, so Harry Phipps, I think a lot of people wanted this case to be closed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of witnesses will gear their thinking towards that person, especially if they're told, we think this person did it. Because later, 2 men came forward and said that when they were younger, they were actually hired by Harry Phipps. Okay, they didn't say that this guy gave his name. They didn't say they knew him.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a random guy came forward and paid them with £1 notes. And that's why they kind of put it together to dig graves. Okay. But I'd be interested in that, right? So I'd say, oh my gosh, show us where these graves are. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So these boys went to the gravesite, said, I think it's around here. Mind you, this is decades later.
Yeah.
So I get it. They can't pinpoint the exact coordinates. But at least,
you know what? If I dug graves, I'd remember exactly where those were.
They had one of those sonar systems that you put over the ground and it went over, so they didn't have to dig a ton.
Right.
But they could tell if something
if there was a depression in the soil. Yeah.
And they didn't find anything.
They actually dug up Harry Phipps' entire factory looking for evidence, and they found nothing. So again, and most pedophiles, especially if it's a triple homicide pedophile act, they don't just stop.
No.
So, Harry Phipps went on to live a normal life the rest of his life until his death, raising his grandson, Nick. So, and pointing out on Hayden, he had met Angela, says in the 90s, he was in a mental institution, according to family members, for treatment. And that's where they believe Hayden met and later married the psychiatric nurse, Angela, in the mid 90s. And she, working with him, resurrected Hayden's memories of alleged sexual abuse. So Hayden didn't really say anything about this until Angela in the mid 90s. And some people would say, well, he was traumatized. He was sexually abused. That's why he became a drug addict. That's why he was drinking. That's why he was institutionalized. Of course, that's what happened. But he had a little brother, and his little brother is absolutely fine.
Yeah.
His little brother, Wayne, did not have that experience growing up. Is it possible that one child was targeted? It happens. I mean, I've heard of those cases, but in almost all of them, once that child comes of age, they move on to the younger one. So for me, it was, again, making Hayden not so credible in my eyes.
Well, and also, so we looked at the police sketch of this man that these people all saw at the beach, and we actually put it through AI to see what it'd look like as a person.
That was fascinating.
And I'm going to include it in the video.
Check it out, because somebody might actually recognize the sketch and be like, oh my God, that's Uncle Peter.
Totally.
Like,
Well, and so we're going to put a side by side of him with Harry Phipps so you can see for yourself, like, does that match the description? That
was another thing that we kept getting hung up on, because there's a lot of investigators that really want to pin it on Harry Phipps so they can just close the case and say, that's who did it. That's what happened. Let it go. Australia's never going to let it go. These are their children. Like, they've never gotten over this case. They want to bury them. They want to bring them home. So that's very important. But with everything that took place around the day they disappeared, it's really hard for them to even get any traction on where these kids may have gone. Harry Phipps, when you did the side-by-side picture, which I thought was so brilliant because AI took into account all of the witnesses' descriptions and combined it with the sketch that a sketch artist has sat down with the witnesses to draw it, which was almost a little laughable. Back in '66, I would think they had a better artist than the one they had, but AI cleaned it up, and the image that you have and that you have on YouTube is a real person. Like, you could really see what that guy would look like. Yeah. And I thought that was a really big deal to be able to give a more realistic impression.
Well, Harry was also in his 40s.
He was 50.
Or he was 50.
Harry Phipps was 50 when the Beaumont children disappeared. And the guy that was with them all day, like all that time on the beach, was said to be in his mid 30s.
Well, and another thing is, which, Hayden thought was important was, we lived on the beach.
Right.
Okay, right. That would be a good spot to bring kids back if you live right there.
Right.
But if he was known as being very generous and people knew him around the beach, don't you think more witnesses would have been like,
recognized
I
him?
saw Harry and said, hey, what's up, man? Like, I don't know. I just feel
nobody could place him with the Beaumont children at the beach. No one could even place Harry at the beach that day. Yeah. And you're right. He was pretty well known in town. Not a lot of millionaires probably in 1966.
It was Australia Day. So for, everyone in the US, it's like our 4th of July. I mean, it was packed on the beach. So it was really hard for people to remember. But I just feel like if you knew the guy, you would remember seeing him.
Agreed. Yes. And also, you'll have the picture of Harry Phipps to put up on YouTube in that side by side. Harry Phipps had dark hair.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, nobody's going to mistake a 50-year-old man, especially back then, pre-plastic surgery and all the things you can do today to try and roll back the clock, which still wouldn't get you to your mid 30s. It's just, they were up close and personal. The guy was in his little swimsuit when he was playing with the kids on the beach. I don't think Harry Phipps would have looked like that in a swimsuit where he'd be mistaken as
athletic
build and tan.
Yeah.
Because when you look at the picture of Harry Phipps, he looks like the polar opposite of the description on the beach. So again, I had a problem with that.
Yeah. And I mean, I get it. Like, I get people wanting this case to be closed.
Yeah.
It's such a hard one because there's 3 little kids that just vanished one day.
Mhm.
Like, people want to pinpoint it to someone, but without evidence or DNA or having him alive,
Yeah.
I mean, there's really not much you could do. But like I said before, we did go to those locations. We obviously couldn't go to Harry's house or anything like that.
Mhm.
But do you want to speak on sort of what you felt while you were there?
Well, sure. Also, I wanted to point out before I forget, there are like multiple military bases there.
Yeah.
And I think they got fixated on the town as though the kids were, wandering around. Nobody saw them get washed out to sea. So that didn't happen. They were seen getting dressed back into their clothes to leave the beach. So that wasn't the cause of death or disappearance.
Do you think that this person took them somewhere else?
I absolutely think they were immediately removed from the area after they went to the bakery and got snacks. Maybe he said, let's go have a picnic. Maybe he said, let's go surprise your dad or, another family member, pile in the car because they didn't have their bus money anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure the guy had their bus money. So another fact that I thought was interesting, just to go back, I know this is skipping back a bit, but Arna, the 7-year-old sister, had told her mother that Jane had a boyfriend days before their disappearance. So they had gone to the beach, and this is just the time where the mother's starting to let Jane have a little bit of freedom with her siblings to play. She trusted her. So they had gone to the beach 2 or 3 days before, or shortly before, and Arna made that statement. So was this guy grooming Jane? My sense was Jane was the target. The other 2 kids were inconsequential. He could also control Jane by her younger siblings by threatening them, what he would do to them if she didn't comply. Yeah. And I see that a lot, not just with children, with adult victims, where they use the friends as leverage or the siblings as leverage. So for me, the impressions that I got when I was on the beach, I saw the parents, obviously in spirit, walking with their children.
Good.
So it was good to see that they were together. And it was a very peaceful feeling that they were showing themselves, knowing that we had some energy to work their case and that we were going to cast light on it. And just to be able to see them walking hand in hand and laughing and being whole again was healing for me, and I hope for my audience as well.
Well, and I found out that the parents ended up divorcing years later, like decades later, but like they did divorce because that's such a hard thing to go through. Yeah. She probably blamed herself for letting them go on that bus alone. But I remember reading a comment from one of your listeners, and they said that they worked at that senior home that the mom had been living at for years. And she just would talk about her children and how she can't wait to see them and loved them and wanted closure, but they just seemed like great people.
I can't imagine. I would be crawling out of my skin. That's like you and your sisters just being gone, vanishing. Like, how would a married couple ever stay together? That would be impossible. Because looking at each other reminds you of the children because you're a family. And so the only way to not think about it and not go into that place of pain is to remove your partner out of the picture. I mean, I can understand. I think they stayed together a long time afterwards, though. So obviously they really loved each other. And then to see them together, all 5 of them, means that the mom and dad chose each other in death. They went back to a time before the pain to be together. And that's a good thing. So the living are the ones left with the pain. The dead are the ones that can move beyond it, where it's no longer part of their reality.
And I do remember you mentioning that you did get military attached to the person.
Yeah.
And so we did a little bit of research, but I can't say it's fully accurate just because it was so long ago. And I mean, the sources online can only be so accurate. But it was the dad's brother. So their uncle was definitely someone that people looked into, because I believe he was military.
I don't think they ever interviewed the uncle. And I'm not saying it was the uncle, because I don't want to do what they did to Harry Phipps. I'm just saying I felt a military connection to the person. It was Australia Day. If they were back on leave, or, you know, they're going to go to the beach, they'd have time off maybe at that time. And also the Beaumont dad was former military. So I didn't know if it was a friend of his that maybe he had talked about that got familiar with them.
Well, it would make sense why they would feel comfortable changing with him and leaving with him.
Yeah, this is somebody they know.
They have to.
Or that they think is like a relative or close to them, because there's no other explanation for why Jane, Arna, and Grant would be described on the beach by witnesses as looking relaxed and happy.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, of course.
And we should remind people that if you want to call in with questions for us to answer on a future show, you can call in at 802-332-3811. And we'd love to hear from you about your stories of spiritual encounters, as well as your own abilities or any questions you have about life after death. I'm Allison DuBois. This is The Dead Life. And to all of my believers out there, don't stop believing. Tune in next week for part 2 of our investigation into the Beaumont children.
Join us next week on The Dead Life. And don't forget to subscribe now to get notified of every new episode.